In October of 2007, the 43rd expansion in Magic the Gathering history, Lorwyn, came out. The Celtic-inspired set kicked off a two-set mini-block that acts as Act 1 of the overall Lorwyn Shadowmoor storyline and introduces not just a new plane, but a new card type as well to the game of Magic. The story can be enjoyed by reading the Lorwyn novel by Corey J. Herndon and Scott McGough. And as usual, here's a quick summary of the goings-on.
Let's do it!
It's an idyllic day in the Gilt-Leaf Wood, as an elven wedding party from the tribe of Mornsong is traveling to meet the bride's betrothed for the very first time. A member of the elvish second highest caste, an elf known as Marlin, is escorting her more prominent bride-to-be when she is asked to retrieve some moonglove, a poison to which elves are immune. As Marlin is scouting for some, she notices that the wedding party's singing had suddenly stopped. Concerned, she races back to rejoin her traveling party and, upon arrival, finds everyone being smothered by sentient vines. She finds and attempts to free the bride, but finds herself succumbing to the vine's hold. Bloodied and beaten, the elf is near death as she hears fairies whispering into her ear. Aisling, a flamekin, is thinking about the missing elven bridal party as she travels down the very same forest road on which they were lost. A pilgrim, that is, one who is in search of a greater elemental, she has garnished a reputation across Lorwyn for being a very good messenger. She is on her way to find the Kithkin stronghold of Kinsbale, but to get there she must take an enchanted ferry across the Wanderwine River. Many of the Kithkin on board fear that the water magic yielded by the river guide, a merfolk named Sigge, won't hold up to the Flamekin's fire. Sigge and his first mate have Aisling concealed as to put any concerns to rest amongst the passengers. Unfortunately, the ferry is attacked by an Arbamander, a giant amphibian, and, despite the precaution, the ferry's magic fades as Sigge is knocked out cold. Thankfully, a group of fairies were also on board. This Vendilion clique is able to save the Firekin from falling into the water, but decide not to go back to save the drowning Kithkin for fear of being eaten by the Arbamander. Luckily, Sigge regains consciousness and is able to pull the imperiled Kithkin to safety. Back in the Gilt-Leaf Forest, an elven Dane, or pack leader, named Rise, is leading a hunting party after a group of goblin-like creatures known as boggarts. His party had many new recruits, and he wanted to make sure hunts can go smoothly with them. These boggarts, however, weren't like most of their kind. Rather, they were all a bit mad. The elves waited to strike with their bows drawn, awaiting Rise's signal. One of the new additions, however, shot his arrow much too early. The boggarts, now aware of the hunting party's existence, erupt into a panicked chaos. Rise curses and knocks a special arrow infused with Yew magic, a magic largely unknown to most elves, and shot it into the crowd, killing many of the enraged boggarts and scattering the rest. Immediately afterwards, Rise admonishes his inexperienced party members before executing his backup plan, two giants he had hired as extra muscle to finish the job. Problem is, Rise didn't have the authority to hire giants from his superiors, and it's an action that could carry repercussions for the Dane in the future. Back across the Wanderwine River, Aisling arrives in Kingsbale. Taking notice of the Flamekin's presence, the stronghold Sen, or Mare, and Gaddock Teague, an abnormally tall and slender Kithkin of importance, were conferring with a red yew, or treefolk, named Kolfanar, who is the last of his type. They discuss possibly sending the Flamekin to find his protege. After all, Ash is known for being a great messenger. Teague raised some concerns about the plan, but Kolfanar, who is not accustomed to having his views questioned, dismissed them. The pair meet with Aisling before introducing her to Brigid Bailey, a hero of Kingsbale, who is to escort the Flamekin as she seeks out the Yew's protege. In the wings is the Vendilion clique who had saved the Flamekin from the river. The fairy trio eavesdrop on the meeting, telepathically sharing information amongst one another, until they feel they've gathered all of the intelligence they need, before using the fairy circle to divulge what they have learned to their mother of all, Una, Queen of the Fae. Back in the forest, Rise and his second-in-command exchange words about the former's use of Yew magic and the hiring of the two giants to assist the hunting party. Afterwards, The elven Dane confronts the elven youth, who had fired the errant arrow that sent the boggarts amok. Rise had plans to take mercy on the boy, but as he is doing so, the Dane superior, Tercer Nath, arrives and immediately lays into him for the very same thing the Dane's second-in-command had complained about, telling Rise it showed weakness in him. Nath then takes a sword to the elven youth's face, slaying him as a repercussion for his errant arrow, before relieving Rise of command of his pack and instructing him to get rid of the giants he had hired. Rise locates the two giants and informs them that the deal is done, but the giants refuse payment, saying there are still a few boggarts left to deal with before they can be satisfied their work is complete. Knowing this would look very poorly on him, Rise arranges a new deal by promising to gather stories and share those with Roisin Meanderer, the giant's long-missing sister. An accord met, the giants depart to await Rise at Kingsbale for the festival of sharing stories. Afterwards, Nath sends Rise to scout an area of the forest thought to be overrun with these mad boggarts. What Rise discovered, though, is not only were the boggarts there not enraged, they were, in fact, gathered for a festival. He relays this information to Nath, who decides to attack anyway, as doing so would rid their forest of a lesser, shameful life form. Initially, the elves had the upper hand, then something changed. The boggarts' demeanor turned fanatic, and the elven hunting party found the tide turn against them. Running out of arrows, Rise used his forbidden yew magic to turn simple blades of grass into ammunition, but the odds were increasingly stacking against the elves. That's when Rise calls out for help from his mentor, the red yew Colfanor. The result was a poisonous blast that killed nearly everything in the forest save for only a few, including Rise himself, his former second-in-command, Griffith, and Nath. Rise awoke in what looked like the middle of a wasteland. Shortly after his coming to, he is approached by an elven woman named Marlin of the Mornsong tribe. It's now that he discovers that his horns have been blown off in the forest-destroying blast, marking him as an eye-blight, and undesirable in the eyes of the Gilt-Leaf elves. Marlin consoles him, telling him the Mornsong do not treat eye-blights the same way that the Gilt-Leaf tribes do. Just as Rise was beginning to feel a bit better about the situation, however, an elemental shows up, no doubt due to his devastating act in the forest, and Rise convinces Marlin that it's best that they depart, or face the consequences. Upon leaving the scene, the pair is approached by a flamekin, a kithkin, and a trio of fairies who are tagging along. He finds this flamekin, one known as Aisling, carries a message for him from none other than his former mentor, Colfanor, and the group sets off for Kingsbale. Upon arriving in the Kithkin town, Rise is reunited with his yew master. Meeting in private, the red yew gives the elf a seed and tasks him with planting it in the sacred tree-folk grove near the Murmuring Bosque, as to ensure his yew line will not die out, and, in exchange, will answer any questions the elf has upon his return, if able. Meanwhile, back in the forest, Nath resolves to hunt down and kill Rise, marking him as a kin killer for the massive loss of life as a result of his actions during their losing effort against the boggarts. To do so, he puts into rank a party of Vinebred, zombie warriors controlled by vines that course through their bodies, and sends them towards Kingsbale to seek out their target. Rise rendezvous with Aisling, Marlin, and the rest of their party, and informs them of the task Colfanor has assigned him. The party then departs from the town, only to meet Brian and Keel, the two giants Rise had previously hired, outside of its gates. After a bit of a conversation and some bickering, including how Rise has yet to deliver any stories to their sister, Marlin steps in and calms things down by promising that the best messenger in the land, the flamekin Aisling, will ultimately deliver stories to their sister, but that they still need to gather a few more first. That's when poison-tipped arrows begin to fly in the party's direction. Aisling takes notice and responds with a wave of flame that burns the arrows out of the sky. Unfortunately, the move took a lot of effort, and she was unable to do the same against the next volley. Brian cupped Marlin in his giant hands to protect her, but he and his brother took the brunt of the attack, the poison beginning to take hold. Nath, meanwhile, moves in onto Kinsbale, announcing to the town that he won't hurt anyone so long as they do not interfere with the Guiltleaf agenda. As the Elven commander meets with Colfanor and the town's Sin, the merfolk, Sige, ferries Ryze's party down the river and away from the town on his floating barge. He takes the group to the dark tributaries, so called because of the dark, deep, and mostly unknown waters there. Merlin sleeps, wounded from the recent ordeal, and the giants are in a daze of sorts from the effects of the poisoned arrows. In quiet, Ryze notices a rhythmic tapping. Pretty soon, the entire party falls asleep. The clique of fairies, whom have been uninvited guests this whole time, having cast a light sleeping spell on them all. As the party sleeps, the fairies dig through their dreams in search of more juicy nuggets to share with their queen. They find Ryze and Aisling to be open books, but that the Kithkin seems to be hiding a secret. While in Marlin's head, the fairies hear a voice. Marlin's voice. She calls them little bugs, saying that their spying attempt is a serious offense that she could not overlook. After a little back and forth, the fairies note that the Mornsong elf was eager to fight. A spell is cast, and the clique take Marlin to Una, their queen and mother of all. The remaining party then awaken to discover Marlin missing and quickly deduce it was the fairies' doing as they too are now gone. Ryze vows to go after her, just as soon as he has planted the red yew seed for Colfanor. In Glen Elendra, the main realm of Lorwyn's fairies, this Vendilion clique arrives with Marlin in tow. The Mornsong elf bows before the Great Mother of the Fairies, saying that she is but a stranger and knows not what she has gotten herself into. Una welcomes the foursome with open, loving arms. Meanwhile, her former traveling companions approach the Murmuring Bosque, a grove that serves as a parliament of sorts for the plane's entire community of treefolk. Ryze has been there before, but is aghast to find the entire area has been leveled, destroyed by some unknown force. Despite the devastation, the elf plants Colfanor's seed as instructed. A following morning, Ryze comes to the shore of the bosque, where he discovers his Kithkin companion, Brigid, wounded and frantic. She tells the elf that Sige is dead, and the Flamekin was the one who killed him. Apparently, she had asked him to leave Ryze behind and ferry her after some elemental she was chasing, and, when he refused, she killed him. The Kithkin continued, saying that, afterwards, she had thrown the Flamekin off into the water, dousing her flame, and that if Ryze wanted Aisling to face justice for her crime, he had maybe 6 hours to do so before her flame returns. But Ryze, being a cunning elf, sensed that this Kithkin was lying. Still, he let her finish her story, allowing things to play out. It's then that Sige emerged from the water with a flameless Aisling on his back. Ryze is then surprised with the sight of Brigid knocking an arrow and taking an aim at the merfolk, demanding that the elf mend her arm and surrender to her the Flamekin. Seeing little choice in the matter, he agrees. Soon the Kithkin flies away rather unnaturally, bound for Kinsbale, the extinguished Aisling with her. She curses the Guiltleaf as she departs. Shortly thereafter, Marlin rejoins the group, along with the 3 fairies who had spirited her away to begin with. The Mornsong elf tries to play off her disappearance, but Ryze is having none of it. Marlin then confesses that she and the clique had ventured here and there and met with the fairy's great mother, to whom she had bargained her dream stuff. Elsewhere, Kinsbale was in chaos. Gaddock Teague confers with Colfanor, assuring the treefolk that the Flamekin will be brought back in time. The Red Yew aware of Brigid's betrayal to her traveling companions. Ryze and his party, meanwhile, are en route for the Kithkin town, their travel being hastened by some 20 fairies, whom had been called upon to help with their traveling speed. Upon arrival, however, most of the fairies were wiped out, and the party fell to the ground. Ryze awakens to see Merlin and a near-death Aisling propped up against Colfanor's trunk. Tersern Nath, who is obviously in control of the situation, challenges Ryze to a duel to the death. Ryze sends Merlin and the fairy clique to leave him be, and the 2 elves have at one another. Away from the main event, the Mornsong elf and her fairy companion encounter Ryze's former second-in-command, Griffith, and his contingent of elven warriors. She instructs her fairy's friends to stand back. Then, with a clap of her hands, an odd smoke appears, choking the elves as they begin to drop their weapons. With the simple command of, "Go away," all of the elves are suddenly gone, as is the smoke. The fairies watched all of this unfold in stupefied amazement. As for the duel between Rise and Nath, the former found himself greatly wounded. As Nath worked towards finishing the duel, however, Rise grabbed him by the horns and twisted them until he snapped the Tarsen's neck, killing him instantly. As his life left him, so did the glamour enchantment he had cast upon himself. The once respected elf, now exposed as an eye blight in disguise. A while later, Griffith located Nath's body. Taking up his late superior's silver sword, he vowed to hunt down Rise even if he had to destroy half of Lorwyn to do it. Afterwards, Culfanor was speaking rather cryptically to those in his audience, Brigid, Teague, and the near-death Aisling, about how the world is changing and, for the world to survive, he too must survive. He tells Brigid, who is dealing with her own emotions, not to fret, for he, too, has betrayed his friends, and now must die, but that he will be reborn anew, ready to carry on what's left of the old world into the new one. In company with Rise once again, Brigid regrets her decision to follow orders with which Teague had tasked her, and vows to right the wrongs she has caused. The pair discuss for a moment, then decide to go back to Culfanor. When they arrive, they witness a stead-like elemental charging towards both the tree folk and the near-death flamekin. Just as Aisling's flame was about to be extinguished forever, the elemental passed through her. Suddenly, the flamekin's flame burned brighter than ever before. Culfanor, too, was set aflame, as Aisling's body was lying against his. The ancient yew burned brightly all through his death. "Be seeing you, Rise," were the tree folk's last words. Emotional after the death of their friend, Culfanor, the party reconvenes and returns to the Murmuring Boss to check in on the seedling they had planted for him. To their amazement, the seedling had grown a full 6 feet, something that should have taken years, in an extremely short time. Rise, wizened in the way of tree folk, tells his companions that the sapling probably won't gain consciousness or be able to move for years, if not decades. It's then that the party hears someone say, "Ouch." That's when they notice a sapling showing facial features as it uproots itself, while the party stares in amazement. And that does it for part 1 of the 2-part Lorwyn story. Next month we'll shed light on part 2, Morningtide. For now though, there's still a lot to say about Lorwyn as a set.
A little Magic the Gathering. I love Magic the Gathering.
With Aaron Forsyth and Devin Lowe as the set's design and development leads, respectively, Lorwyn brought to the game of Magic 300 new cards along with 1 reprint, Fertile Ground, which was first seen in Urza's Saga. The first in a 2-set mini-block, it kicked off a 4-set Mega Cycle experiment, with Morningtide being the follow-up, leading into a second mini-block consisting of Shadowmoor and Eventide.
At the time, all blocks had been 3 sets, so this was me proposing something a little different than what we've done. The idea I had was pretty simple, is let's have large, small, and then large, small, and the 2 worlds would be connected in some way.
Featuring heavy traditional fantasy and Celtic-inspired theming, including that of Irish, Scottish, Welsh, and English influence.
My name means toaster in Celtic.
It's the first set in Magic the Gathering history to not contain the human creature type. The set did, however, have a very heavy emphasis on tribal themes. So much so that the tribal card subtype that was teased in the previous set, Planar Chaos, in the card Bound in Silence, was quite prevalent in not just the set, but the mega block as a whole.
It ended up being something we thought we were just going to make part of Magic. We actually complicated text boxes for a while to do it. One of the problems was either you were going to do it all the time or not do it all the time. Like either every spell that felt like it was a goblin, or you just didn't do that. Like it felt weird to like, this enchantment that makes goblin tokens is a goblin, but this one that doesn't isn't a goblin. And what we found was it just didn't get used enough. It just wasn't something that, it required us to change how we templated things, and it just wasn't worth the cost.
Almost every color featured 2 tribes, with some carryover into a secondary color. Elves in green and black, fairies in blue and black, giants in red and white, goblins in black and red, Kithkin in white and green, merfolk in blue and white, treefolk in green, black and white, and elementals, which are not only in red, but also in the game's other 4 colors as well. There are also shapeshifters, which are available in all colors, but are not a tribe unto themselves. Rather, they feature the new changeling ability, which allows them to be all creature types at all times, even those not found in the set. The ability is actually the keywording of an ability that was found previously on only 1 card in Magic history at the time, Mistform Ultimus from Legions. And Changeling is just one of an assortment of mechanics officially introduced in Lorwyn. There's also Champion, which is a mechanic that allows a powerful creature to, essentially, overlay a creature of a specific type. An example of this can be seen on the card Wren's Run Packmaster, which requires you to champion an elf by exiling an elf you control when it comes into play, but giving you that elf back once the Packmaster leaves the battlefield. Clash, which creates a mini contest of sorts, in which clashing players reveal the top card of their library. A player wins the clash if their revealed card has the highest converted mana cost, with a payoff should you win your clash. Evoke, a keyword ability that appears on creatures that allow you to cast them at a discount to take advantage of enter the battlefield abilities, only you have to immediately sacrifice the evoked creature. And Hideaway, which appears in a cycle of rare land cards that let you hide away via exiling face down from amongst the top few cards in your deck. Once a specific condition is met, you can then play that card for free. Hideaway, by the way, was recently brought back for the first time since Lorwyn in the recently released set, Streets of New Capenna. And on the topic of cycles, Lorwyn has 8. In addition to the Hideaway lands, others of note include Commands, powerful rare modal spells that let you select 2 of each's 4 modes upon cast. Cryptic Command is often considered to be the most tournament worthy of the bunch. Incarnations, which were inspired by the original Incarnation cycle from the set Judgment, and provide a powerful boon to its controller, such as the card Dread, destroying any creature that deals you damage. Vivid Lands, an uncommon cycle that come into play with 2 charge counters on them, and can tap for 1 color of mana on their own, but, at the cost of a charge counter, can be tapped for a mana of any color. And Planeswalkers, which made their debut in Lorwyn after being pushed back from Future Sight where they were supposed to be introduced. While the number of Planeswalker cards has expanded in years since their induction, there were initially only 5, 1 of each color. Ajani Goldmane, Jace Barrelin, Liliana Vess, Chandra Nalaar, and Garruk Wildspeaker.
4 damage to your Planeswalker.
We were going to introduce Planeswalkers as something that was going to be new to Magic as a future shifted card. We were actually going to do 3 of them. But we didn't quite get to a point when we have to hand off Future Sight that we were happy with them. And we knew that these were going to be important. So we said, okay, let's just take our time. When we get them right, we'll put them in a set. The interesting thing about Planeswalkers in Lorwyn was they were purely kind of added on. There was nothing about them that was organic to what the set was about. They didn't mechanically tie into the set. They weren't part of the story. It really was just us saying, we want this to be part of the game.
Lorwyn also has cycles based around creature subtypes rather than color. Examples of this are the various champions, harbingers, tribal legends, and so on that are found in the set. While not largely considered to be a set full of competitive level or even widely notable cards, Lorwyn did contain a handful that made an impact one way or another. Doran the Siege Tower was at one time a modern staple and was a component of Uri Pelig's 2007 Worlds-winning Doran Rock deck.
Uri Pelig has won the 2007 World Championships.
Gaddock Teague, which was a key inclusion in the once powerful Maverick deck in Legacy, and is still seen in competitive lone builds today. Ponder, a surprisingly good card draw card at Common that had to be restricted to 1 copy per deck in Vintage, and right out banned in Modern due to it being simply too good of a combo enabler. Thorn of Amethyst, a good sideboard card that makes non-creature spells more expensive to cast. Rings of Brighthearth, a combo-enabling artifact that allows its controller to copy their own activated non-mana abilities. Ingot Chewer, a 3/3 for 5 mana that carries an evoke cost of just 1 red and destroys an artifact when it comes into play. Moldrifter, another evoke creature that allows its controller to draw 2 cards as an ETB trigger. Shriekmaw, an evoke creature that emulates the old-school Magic card Terror by allowing you to destroy a non-artifact, non-black creature upon ETB. The aforementioned Cryptic Command, which gives its caster a choice of 2 of the following 4 modes: counter target spell, return a permanent to its owner's hand, tap all of your opponent's creatures, and draw a card. Profane Command, which gives its caster the choice of 2 between target player losing X life, returning a creature with mana value X or less to the battlefield, giving a target creature -X/-X until end of turn, or giving X target creatures the Fear keyword ability until end of turn, and Thoughtseize, arguably the best single discard spell ever printed in the game. Often an ideal turn 1 play. At the cost of 1 black and the loss of 2 life, you can force any player, including you if that fits your strategy, to discard any non-land card of your choice.
This is a very aggressive discard spell. Obviously, it's seen a lot of tournament play. It's a nice 1-drop answer to things. Really gives you some nice, clean, easy answers to some of the problems. And I think we put it in the set to allow some of the black tribal races to have some answers to some of the problems they were running into.
Oh, and as for the set's pre-release and release promos, those were a foil alternate art Rin's Run Packmaster for the former, and a special foiled Shriekmaw for the latter.
Not bad at all.
So what are your thoughts on Lorwyn? Is it amongst your favorite Magic the Gathering sets? If so, let us know in the comment section below. And please support Magic Untapped by subscribing to us here on YouTube and tossing a buck on our tip jar on Patreon. Thank you so much for watching.